We can change our life for better. A talk by Dr. A. Sri Kumar Menon. We can change our destiny, and that will hold mankind for better, because we all have within our power and capacity to make a better world than it is today. We all have the capacity to do justice, show mercy, treat others with dignity and respect, and raise above what divides us, and come together to meet challenges of life. We cannot achieve the goal of making our society a safe, peaceful and prosperous place to live in if each one lives in his own sweet will and accord. What is required is a effort of humanity as a whole. Each person should change himself rather than trying to change others. Let us rededicate ourselves to a new life, what I call a life of conscience. We can pool our strengths to make heaven on earth, heaven or hell far away in an unknown place to which it is believed that the souls ascend to after shedding mortal coil, the one conceived to chastise the conduct of man on this very earth while he is living. Living with heavenly joy is possible in this world itself. We make our world hell by our evil actions, by being slaves to our passions and raw instincts and negative emotions. Each one of us carries two selves, aham or true self or higher self, and a false self or lower self or ego or ahankara. Ahankara is a feeling that world moves around us and we are so powerful that we can command anything on this earth. It was ahankara or arrogance on the part of legendary Ravana that led him to his doom, in spite of his extraordinary powers achieved through contemplation upon Lord Shiva. We are always at the mercy of the Supreme Power. When we get stuck with a mortal disease, we realize the limitation of our body and ourselves. With ego, we do everything, which spells our disaster, under the false belief that all that we do good to us. Unknowingly, we shorten the lifespan allotted to us and move to silent death. Ahankara prompts to lead a life of extravagance and ruthlessness, the life of demons portrayed in our epics and Puranas. Demons had immeasurable strength due to their capacity for performing long penance and austerities, and as a result of wounds they received from Devas. Demons first turned against the divine source from whom they received the power, the height of being ungrateful and act of betrayal. Their strength turned to be liabilities. We should give up demonic qualities and emulate Devas for gods. Our worship of God is real only if it helps to weed out the vices from us and plant the virtues in his place. So a true God-fearing man will be man of virtues. God blesses those whose thoughts, feelings and actions are pure and not contaminated. We are under the illusion that we can live for ourselves even at the cost of others. What ultimately succeeds is loving every living being and giving everyone his due share, as all are creations of the same light. Company of good people makes evildoers reform themselves. That is the reason satsang or being in the company of virtuous people is recommended as a step to achieve the grace of God. When we are with good company, sudden realization of our pitfall comes up. The great Saint Valmiki was none other than a robber. He looted the property of those who passed through the forest. When he stopped the three saints to loot their possessions, they asked him why he was committing the sin of robbing the people. He replied that it was all done for the sake of supporting his wife and son, his family. The saints asked him that as he does heinous act for his family, he should go and ask them whether they would share the burden of sins committed by him. He was confident that they whom he thought as most loving to him, would readily agree to share part of the seeds. But when he asked his wife, he refused point blank. He thought at least his loving son would agree. He also refused instantly and told that whosoever commits the sin should bear the punishment single-handed. This incident opened the eyes of Robert. He understood the great truth that relations such as that of husband and wife, or that of father and son, and so on, are mere illusions or deceptive, and that it was due to his blind attachment to them that drove him to commit inhuman acts. When he returned to the forest, he saw saints waiting there for an answer. He had a sudden flash of illumination in his mind that the world is mithya or illusion or is projection of unreal, just as we feel that the moon is quivering when we look at its image in the moving waves of the stream. He prostrated before them, learned Brahma Vidya or spiritual knowledge, and went on meditation. He was under the spell of meditation for years, oblivious of the surroundings. Meanwhile, an anthill had formed covering him. When the saints passed out that way after a long time, they overheard the sound of recitation Rama Rama emanating from the anthill. They found it was from the robber whom they met earlier. He turned into a great saint called Vatmiki, meaning seen in Vatmikam means and help, who is the author of great epic Ramayana, one of the greatest epics ever written. His transformation was instant and complete. Even Dashagriva, or 10-headed monster Ravana, who was epitome of all vices, realized his mistakes just before his death in the hands of Lord Sri Rama. It was not a case of mere death in the case of Ravana. It was a case of realization of his divine nature, which he had attained with strenuous meditation. One should realize one's good nature even without waiting for any calamity to befall on them. We should be able to rid of avidya or ignorance with awakening of vidya or jnana or knowledge. We need not burn our finger to know the heat of the stove. We need not leap into water to test whether we can swim. We can know by insight, which only human beings are endowed with. Our mind is like a pot we have prepared for sowing seeds. Good thoughts or bad thoughts could be seeds. Just like we select good seeds or seeds which are not infected for sowing, we should sow good thoughts and nurture them so that they grow fully and give out fruits in plenty or blossom into flowers which spread their sweet fragrance. Of course, before seedlings get firmly implanted, weeds and other plants which might eat away the nutrients meant for the cultivated plant may grow without us planting them. Those are to be weeded out. Similarly, due to pressures of the modern stressful world, weeds of wicked thoughts may crop up and compete with good thoughts for their survival. Those thoughts are to be nipped in the bud. From the thoughts arise emotions and feelings. Emotions could again be positive and negative. Positive emotions are love, compassion, and negative emotions are anger, vengeance, jealousy, covetousness, and so on. Music, worship, meditation, dhyana, japa, kirtana, and so on help us to experience positive emotions, whereas deafening sounds of thunder and quarrels between people generate negative emotions. Emotions or feelings give power to or fuel thoughts. In other words, they fuel thoughts to transform into action. Stronger the feelings, stronger they fuel thoughts to action, and vice versa. Wrong thoughts fueled by negative emotions lead to wicked actions. Thus, thoughts and emotions are ultimately deciding factors for action. We cannot stop our action directly. We can control our actions and make it good or bad only by manipulating our thoughts and feelings. So the best way to ensure good action is to make our thoughts good and emotions positive. Then automatically our action will also be good. When same actions are repeated, it becomes habit. When habits are accumulated, it becomes our lifestyle. Our lifestyle is like a cloth or tapestry made of threads. Threads are thoughts and emotions. The quality and the color of the cloth depend upon the quality of thread and the color used for weaving. Similarly, our lifestyle is determined by our thoughts and feelings. Our lifestyle determines how we spend our lives, usefully or not. Holy thoughts and feelings give physical and mental strength. They even delay aging process and ward off diseases. A sick person recovers or recuperates from illness and responds to treatment much faster when he is well disposed, or when his mind is filled with good thoughts, or when he is in a good mood than when he is brooding or worrying. Good thoughts rejuvenate our system. Many times natural cure too happens. Man is basically created with good or sublime thoughts and feelings. However, those are hidden deep within ourselves, just like pearls are at the bottom of the sea and other mean creatures are on the surface. Similarly, unholy thoughts and feelings are in the upper layers of human mind, and those exert much force in our behavior than holy thoughts. When our mind is topsy-turvy or imbalanced due to our wrong ways of reacting to the turbulent nature of the outside world, the chances of our lower impulses exerting their influence on our conduct are much more that of holy impulses, just as the outer layer of oceans are easily accessible. The way for having healthy control of mind is to make the mind chill by being a spectator of the outside world and not being an active participant, and also by constant practice silencing the mind through meditation or withdrawing the mind towards oneself away from outside world and thus allowing it to settle down in calmness. We may be easily tempted to do a bad thing. It is reported that even Sri Rama was enchanted by Devantarada, seeing her beauty. But because of divinity, he could control passion no sooner it was aroused. If that is so, what to talk of in the case of mortals like us? Is there any wonder when we see them chasing the so-called pleasures of the world? What is required is a strong will and constant vigil on our part to maintain our uprightness. What we achieve by the way of greatness, we may lose within split second with our thoughtless action. We have heard the great Saint Durvasa lost all his powers. He achieved through his hard and long service for meditation when he lost his temper for a second, or when he became slave of his anger. Anger, spurred by moments, spells disaster. Anger or aggression gets accumulated in our minds in small doses, and it flares up all on a sudden, even when the situation is non-provocative. We should never allow to get it accumulated. We should give vent to our emotions in positive ways. Our anger could be directed usefully to attack a difficult target, say, to work hard on a physically demanding work. Even thumping the desk is tolerable than hitting or attempting to hit a person. Whenever we are likely to get provoked, we should withdraw our mind towards inside and away from the objects perceived to be provocative. It helps to control anger and retain composure. We should get in touch with our inner self by keeping angry feelings from the mind, remaining calm, and at the same time, if possible, revoking some happy memories of the past. Then the anger dies away. When we are angry, we lose all sense of proportions and sense of what is right and what is wrong. We make mountains out of molehills. Anger is the worst enemy of man. Weapons themselves are powerless, irrespective of how much lethal they are, unless there is an angry man to use them. So the best way to control armament is to conquer the anger in man. Anger is like raging wildfire, which destroys everything that comes in its way, or it is like hissing cobra. It can make man commit any heinous crime. It can make heinous man insane. A person with inflated ego or being pretentious gets provoked easily. It is actually the weak or ulcerated mind, or due to the feeling of insecurity that one gets provoked easily. Developing humility is another way to get away from anger, which also has innumerable other benefits. Only a person who has self-confidence, or he is sure of himself, or who has positive image of himself, and who has what is called self-esteem, and who is capable, can be humble and gentle in behavior. Seeking pleasure and happiness is the birthright of all living beings, including man. There is absolutely no harm in it. But the question is, what is pleasure and what is happiness? Are both the same experience, or are they different kinds of experiences? Where do we seek them? Are their sources under our control? Or can we make them happen at our will or with our capacities? These are often mute questions. Most people do not know the answers to those questions, nor do they bother to know. They blindly serve joy. Both pleasure and happiness are our mental or psychic experiences. It is a feeling of well-being as opposed to tension, experience of pain, monotony, etc. Pleasure is a feeling we get when we enjoy the objects of pleasure which lie outside. In other words, it is due to stimulation from outside sources to which we are conditioned. For instance, we get pepped up when we drink a cup of tea. The alkaloids in the tea stimulates our brain and we feel pleasure. The pleasurable feeling largely depends upon outside sources which we interpret as source of pleasure rather than being objective reality. This is the reason for feelings of pleasure for one man is not the feelings of pleasure for another. For instance, smokers enjoy smoking. It gives pleasure to them. To non-smokers it does not. It is largely because of the way our mind is conditioned. Most often our mind is conditioned in a wrong way. So it is in our mind, and that again false sense of pleasure. It is an illusion. We run after pleasures outside world just like moth goes to flirt with the flame, being attracted by it and destroys itself. Icelanders have a novel way of catching seals or sea lions. They coat sharp knives with blood of some animals and leave them on the shore. Seals mistake those to be their prey and start licking them. They keep on licking till their tongue is ruptured and blood starts oozing out, till they think that the blood is from their prey and keep licking the sharp-edged hard till they die. There is a parallel between our behavior and the behavior of seals in our search for pleasures outside. We dig our grave while chasing outside pleasures. The feelings of pleasure last only so long as outside stimulation lasts. The moment outside stimuli ceases, the feeling of pleasure to stop. Another drawback of seeking outside source of pleasure is that there is diminishing returns. It means that the quantum or intensity of outside stimulation required to generate a particular level of pleasure increases in geometrical proportion. For instance, a person who takes drink for the first time gets tipsy with one drink. Later, he goes for more than one drink to get the same level of feeling. Our biological system gets used or adapted to a level, and the threshold number for stimulus for evoking response increases. This phenomenon happens in all aspects of our human behavior. With some diminishing returns, there is a tendency on the part of the person to seek more and more pleasure, and he gets trapped in the pleasures outside the world. Village folks use a clever method to trap monkeys. They keep nuts in a pot with a narrow mouth. Monkeys put their hands inside the pot and grasp the nuts. Once they hold on to the nuts, their hands cannot come out of the pot. Monkeys try hard to pull out their hands from the pot with firm grip on nuts. In vain. At that time they are trapped. Similar is the condition facing by man who is intoxicated with outside pleasures, who finds he is in their grip. He becomes addicted to objects of pleasure. He loses all controls over himself. He may do anything, whether lawful or not, whether moral or immoral, to attain pleasure. He would seek pleasure at any cost, which would spell his disaster. Happiness is, on the other hand, more permanent and lasting compared to pleasure. Even for happiness, though our sense organs have to come in contact with objects of pleasure, the experience of happiness we get out of it does not solely depend upon outside stimulation. It is moderated by our inner forces such as contentment or gratification. Happiness is also experienced when we set our mind on higher goals in creative pursuits. When we are aware that the supreme power, which is the life force, is in everything, is eternal, and the same exists in every being and living according to such divine principles. Pleasure can be called extrinsic and happiness intrinsic. We can choose such outside sources of pleasure which are beneficial rather than harmful. For instance, we can choose watching TV most of the time or reading good literature. For some people, touring and seeing different places are important. There are other sources such as working for some higher purposes, developing oneself, perfecting oneself in one's conduct and character. Contentment, which is a mental state, can help us to experience real happiness. Contentment is satisfaction with the experience of happiness with outside comforts which are within our reach. It does not depend upon availability outside. Contentment is a happiness we have with whatever we have. It is a will or habit which we can develop. If we develop the feeling that what we have is precious and that it is much better than a condition of deprivation, we feel contentment. Otherwise, as proverb says, we may try to catch birds which are flying, leaving the birds which we have in our hands. In our day-to-day life, we often make comparisons between ourselves and significant others. For instance, we are happy if we possess some new or costly thing which our neighbors do not possess, and unhappy if we don't have something which our neighbor is having. We vie with each other in possessing material things to show off our status. We devalue what we have when we find someone else is having the same. Thus, we are not happy with whatever we have. We should not go for status value or exhibitionism. People flaunt their wealth by spending mostly their ill-gotten or tainted money lavishly on many superfluous things, when we have tendency to project ourselves. Thus, for power, position and opulence is again the attraction of moth to flame. Due to evil thirst for power and position, people go all out to amass wealth by hook or crook. This is the reason for the malignant growth of the so-called black money. Even those who are not rich become ostentatious on the plea that position in the society should be maintained and become indebted. Social position should not be determined by such wasteful practices. The best practice is thrift, simplicity, utility and elegance. It is false prestige which is the garb of ego which prompts such action. We should give spirit behind every action more importance than rituals and practices. We should be action-oriented or ready for action or for putting our labor more physical and intellectual rather than leading a passive or sedentary life. An action meticulously planned does not materialize without the required effort in the right direction. We cannot live in the blueprint of a building plan however well it is drawn. We have to translate into action, that is, converting the plan into a solid building to stay. Same holds good to all our ideas. Similarly, actions without backed by planning tantamount to firing shots at random and which miss targets and which is wasting bullets. There is a beautiful story which demonstrates the value of hard and sustained work and undergoing hardships to reap consequent joy that comes out of it. A lump of clay asked his colleague, a clay pot, how is it that how was it he became smart and could enjoy dancing on the foreheads of them while he lay inert, wanting by nobody? Young beautiful village women carry decorated mud pots on their heads, carrying water from the wells. The pot answered that he was very much like him, just a lump of clay. Water dug him with his spade, thrust him to shape up, put him in the flame for setting. During all those processes, he had to bear excruciating pain. After all that process, he came out as strong, tough and attractive once he looked. He was then put on exhibition for sale. Customers came and knocked at his head to find out the quality. He had to suffer that pain too silently. At last, customers picked up and women started using him to carry water. In other words, he attained enviable position after undergoing a long trail of pain and hardship. This applies to everyone's life. Fruits come only out of hard labor. We enjoy the fruits better when it is a result of our hard labor. We enjoy life better with the wealth we earn by honest means, meaning by putting hard labor. We don't enjoy those which come to us easily. At the end of the day of our hard work, we enjoy our meals well, enjoy our leisure well and sleep well. It is said that children should not be pampered by offering them a cozy life, as they would not know the value of money and hard work. They tend to be good for nothing. It is said that what we achieve is the result of 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, which is true. Self-sufficiency or self-reliance is laudable. Dependency on others or living on others' charity is to be decried. Now the question is how to be action-oriented or develop readiness to act as opposed to being lethargic. Leading physically and mentally active life is a way to develop action readiness. We should engage ourselves in physical activities such as walking, doing household work, developing readiness to work with our hands. Similarly, we should engage our mind in reading, thinking, writing, speaking. We should put all our sense organs and motor organs to work as much use as we comfortably can, as we are able to lead a dynamic life as opposed to sedentary life. Let us say we want to move mountains. To start with, if we feel strongly that we want to move the mountain, it provides thrust to our effort. It is quite possible that we might be able to move. On the other hand, right in the beginning, if we feel that it is impossible, even if it is possible, it will prove to be impossible. So, the initial set of our mind is important. The saying, if we feel we can, we can. If we feel we cannot, is true. We should see an opportunity or challenge or chance to prove our capacity when occasion demands, rather than thinking that it's a problem. It is purely our mental set which has nothing to do with the objective situation. A person who feels that he is called an optimist, and he who thinks he cannot is called a pessimist. Optimism and pessimism are our mental tendencies or predispositions which we develop consciously or unconsciously. We can develop optimism by undertaking difficult tasks, completing them well, and celebrating the success or tasting the success without getting deterred by the failures on the way. If we get stuck by the failures we invariably face in solving problems, we get discouraged and retreat. Then we develop proclivity for pessimism. Small successes in life accumulate like drops of water, make the ocean. The capacities we have are elastic in nature. The neural network or web in our brain is much more complex than the most man-made electronic circuits, and hence our brain has unimaginable power which needs to be harnessed by intellectual efforts. Once we put our brain to work at this comfortable place, the joy, apart from results we get, should be experienced than be told. Generally, we make use of only 10% of the power of our brain. The rest goes waste due to disuse and also due to our excessive dependence on the so-called modern gadgets like computers, TV, etc. It is possible due to prolonged underutilization of brain power that is happening slowly but steadily these days, that it may give rise to generation with low mental power, and we might be putting back the clock of human progress unless adequate and timely steps are taken. With the onslaught of computers in our daily life, paperless office and perhaps paperless living is our goal. With the result, human faculties like reading and writing turn to be endangered species, as these capacities are deteriorating faster than we can imagine. I recall my meeting with a super specialist Indian doctor whom I met at Amma Center in Ann Arbor, US, Michigan, who told me that he hardly remembered when he last used his pen when I handed him over my handwritten poems. His words summarized succinctly the way we are moving. We have become slaves to modern gadgets like computers, TV, labor-saving machines. For instance, modern housewives, under the guise of balancing their time between work and household duties, use number of household gadgets. With the result, they hardly practice their traditional skills, which are in the process of gradual extinction. We should be true to ourselves, in the sense we should not be assuming or pretentious and formal, or lacking in human touch either by virtue of our position, power, or wealth. Child, for instance, is very natural. We should be childlike. Great people and creative people behave like children. They behave spontaneously without reservation, with touch of warmth and goodwill. Children can become friendly with everyone easily. The reason is their mind is pure. They are innocent. And as they don't commit wrong willfully, they don't get to feel guilty. They are also not burdened with preconceived notions and prejudices, which adults due to wrong upbringing pick up while they are growing up. They become narrow-minded or parochial rather than being broad-minded and expansive. Men with fetters of prejudiced mind do not breathe the air of freedom, which is vital force for perfection of life. His intellectual, emotional, moral, spiritual growth is stunted. Such people are also burdens to Mother Earth than being assets, which every human birth is expected to be. We should not get tied down to routines or chores of daily life. If we do, we feel bored and monotonous. We find time is dragging. Boredom creates other physical and mental problems like depression and aches and pains to the body and other psychiatric problems, psychological problems also. We should feel fresh every time, every moment. How is it possible? Now and then we should take time off from repetitive tasks or routine work and enjoy the beauty of nature, such as sunrise, sunset, variety of greenery, sensing cold wind, listening of chirping of birds, etc. Though from the moment we open our eyes, from the sleep, right in the morning, outside world present before us, we hardly notice this artistic philosophy because we are caught in the so-called rhythm role of life. We miss meaning, things, sight, sound, color, touch of nature. We should go for an evening stroll, delinking our mind from thoughts of daily living in a calm place covered with greenery, where there is fresh air, away from humdrums of busy life, and of course without carrying our mobiles. We should not be preoccupied by unnecessary thoughts. On the other hand, we should keep our mind light and tune our mind to every detail portrayed in nature, and observing nature carefully. We should feast our mind on the bounties, timelessness, and charm of nature. We should do whatever we do with interest and devotion, or putting our heart and soul into it, and making use of our best abilities. We should not do anything half-heartedly or doing for the sake of doing, or considering any work as burden or necessary evil to be put up with. We should not do anything against our will, however insignificant the task we do may be. If we do any work against our will or force ourselves to do, then we feel the work we do is distasteful. The unpleasantness of the work makes life unhappy and may lead to problems, physical and mental health. We should understand that even the unskilled work contributes to overall efficiency. In Ramayana, there is a reference to the help rendered by the smallest animal, squirrel, in building bridge in the ocean for Rama and his army to cross over to Lanka. It is through work we develop wholesome identity or the feeling who we are. Work well done keeps our spirit high and soaring like the fuel keeps fire blazing. It also gives a feeling of self-fulfillment or fulfillment of something significant, and that is very close to our heart, apart from keeping our energy level high all the time. We should not allow our mind to be stale with old, unproductive thoughts and feelings. On the other hand, it should be filled with new and fresh ideas and thoughts, just like the excretory system of our body. It throws out unwanted things. We should throw away antiquated thoughts or those which are dysfunctional. We should not take things too seriously as a matter of life and death. That is a common saying, making mountain out of molehills. There are those who blow up a minor problem into a major one. Of course, we should not remain complacent. We should pay due attention, while at the same time, we should refrain from overreacting to the problem. We should take things around us rather lightly. We should be able to laugh when the situation is funny. Laughter is free and is supposed to be the best medicine. We should enjoy humor and satire. We should be on the lighter side of life. If we are serious all the time, we are putting our mind to work. It is similar to putting a motor car for idling when the fuel is wasted. Similarly, our energy, which should be used for useful purposes, gets wasted or dissipated. We should not have argumentative attitude. We may hold the notion that we do good when we argue with other people. It is not true. We should not enter into dispute with another, nor should we be adamant or uncompromising. We should be empathic, or put ourselves in the psychological shoes of other persons, or should place ourselves in others' position, and should try to see things as he would see, and also be attentive while listening to others. We should give our ideas by accepting the idea of others. It is a two-way traffic. Ideas from which our soul should contribute to common objectives. We should neither rebut nor defend whatever others say under false presumption that it would help to hold our image high. We should be happy when both we and others are happy, and we should be sad when others are sad. But there are some people who are not happy even when there is no reason for being unhappy due to their unrealistic expectations, and happy when others are happy, and unhappy when he hears good news about others. They are the people who think ill of others, which is a mental disease. A Mahatma feels others' joys and sorrows equally. We should keep our mind strong and steady rather than fickle and vacillating. Our mind is steady, we will be able to maintain good spirit even if we face the worst of circumstances. We will not be disheartened. We will be able to mop up our dormant strength to pull through trying circumstances. We should exhaust all methods to solve even the thorny issues by debate, consensus, realizing common state and the need for collaborative efforts. We should take neither praise nor blame too seriously. It is the person who looks for praise is more affected by reproof or reprimand. If we feel that we are the person behind every success, we accept laurels, felicitations, celebration, veneration, and hero worship from others. We at the same time get affected even by lack of recognition. We become so status hungry. We interpret anything outside as sign of disrespect shown by others towards himself. He becomes so self-centered and self-possessed and self-willed. He becomes so removed from the reality, like a person who is under the influence of alcohol. He loses his thinking power eventually and becomes puppet in the hands of those who flatter him. When we expect too much the results of our action, we feel dejected when our actions fail to yield results. The remedy for this is to see some higher force behind all successes and failures, in addition to our best effort. It is a feeling of detachment or the feeling that we are the tools of some higher invisible power, whose way of work is not known to us. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that we are expected to do our duty faithfully without accompanying desire or the feeling that we are entitled for the result or gains that comes out of our efforts. Sincere efforts always follow results, like smoke is always followed by fire. We should find joy in every work we do rather than chasing joy in the results, which are not totally under our control. This attitude ensures our mental equipoise and tranquility and sanity of our mind, which other wavers like that of a monkey stung by scorpion holding a stake in its hand. Faith in God is necessary, but what is the real faith in God? Is it going to temple every day, performing puja, giving offerings called naivedya, and praying to grant something such as to live longer, longevity, health, wealth, promotion, the job, etc., in turn for our offerings? The answer is definitely no. God does not want what all we give. God has everything. Again, God is not the person who exchanges something and wants from the offerings he receives, for the offerings he receives. If that is so, the question is why we worship. When we worship God, we admit that there is some power much superior to us, and everything that happens to us, joy or sorrow, it is His handiwork. When we also know that all are God's creations, we behave humbly with everyone whom we come in contact with. Our devotion to God destroys our ego or arrogance and makes us humble. Being humble is a divine quality and helps well-being, as opposed to arrogance, which spells our disaster and that of society. Similarly, we will not be dejected when we fail in our actions and when we have to face some calamities. A person is a believer in God only if he finds he has acquired such values and practice them in his day-to-day life. Otherwise, he is a rank atheist, loading the garb of a believer. No one can think of God unless his thoughts, feelings, and actions are pure. One's faith in God should help him to reform his character, conduct, and his life. When he is able to make all the principles of right living as part of himself, he becomes real devotee of God or spiritual guru and earns full power, which is used for the good of all, which man is supposed to be capable of acquiring, and he attains Godhood. We should have enough patience. Once we act, we want the result rather instantly. We cannot wait. It is like a child who plants seedling and next moment plucks it to see whether it is growing. It takes 9 months for the infant in mother's womb to develop fully. If the child comes out earlier than that, he or she will have only premature growth, and the child lags behind normal children in many respects, and it takes longer time for the child to overcome the deficiencies and catch up with normal babies. They show the importance of patiently waiting for the fruition of one's effort. There is a saying in Sanskrit, Kshama Shaktanam Bhusham, meaning patience or forbearance is ornamental to strong men. Patience is compared in ancient holy texts with mountains. Mocking at someone else for their defect, weakness, is meanest thing to do. Only a person who is blind to his weakness will laugh at others' weakness and will have condescending attitude. Instead of trying to find the weakness in others, one should try to realize one's weakness and try to correct them. That is awakening of jnana or knowledge. One should try to see goodness or merit in others. It helps to promote his mental health. We must take care of everything, whether they are living or non-living, with as much care as we have towards us. We should keep our body, which is considered as kshetra, or temple for Atman, or self, and temple for God. And Mother Earth, we use clean and tidy, should be kept clean and tidy. There is a saying of ancient wisdom, cleanliness is next to godliness. Simple living rather than ostentatious living is ideal. Simple living does not mean neglecting things. Utmost care to be given in each and everything. There should not be wastage and improper usage of any sort. Whatever we do, we should do with full concentration. It means that we should involve in the activity fully so that we are unaware of the surroundings. It is called one-pointed attention. One-pointed attention focusing on our inner self. Austerities and meditation are the ways recommended to experience divinity. This concentration of mind or immunity to distractibility can also be developed through practice and selective and disciplined living. When Arjuna, the champion of archery, was asked to shoot at the eye of a bird, while looking at its image in oil, he developed one-pointed attention and shot, and the arrows went through the eye. When he was asked what he saw when he set his bow and arrow, his immediate reply was that he saw only the eye of the bird and nothing else. We should have this skill when we deal with matters in the objective world. With so many sources of disturbances created in the modern world, concentration of mind has become a scarce commodity. People want it, while at the same time do not know how to get it. In other words, people are between the horns of dilemma. It even happens that people don't feel comfortable in a calm and quiet place. This phenomenon is called stimulus hunger. We should move with others with touch of warmth. The stresses of modern life and chasing the moon, one loses the tender feelings. The way parents relate to their children, the way people relate to each other, the relationship between husband and wife and that of parents and children lack warm feelings and soothing touch and gentleness. It appears heart, which is supposed to be the seat of love and tenderness, has gone dry. The relationship we find is mechanical or impersonal, a new word coined by me, or impersonal, or even harsh and rude at the slightest provocation. With the result, everyone feels loneliness, even if they live amidst a crowd of people around it. The relationships lack depth and sincerity. sacredness of relationship is to be restored by conscious attempts before affiliative instinct in man disappears due to disuse. Sincerity is doing what is committed to do and sticking to spoken word. It is a habit. It is rooted in the heart. Sincerity is one of the traits of the real devotee of God. We should consider as chance to be helpful to the needy as a rare gift, and should consider our beneficiary as having obliged us and having given us the opportunity for rendering help, for which we should think that we owe him rather than entertaining false questions that we being givers are superior to those who received from us. Mother Amadanandamayi Devi, one of the spiritual luminaries of modern times, says, selfless service or service to the needy is spirituality. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that doing selfless service is nobler than studying all scriptures and performing all Vedic sacrifices. Gopikas of Vrindavan, who were practically unlettered and a demon like Prahlada and a poor bird like Jadayu or Ravana's brother Vibhishana, who reached nearer to Lord Krishna and Narayana, Lord Sri Rama and Lord Sri Rama, incarnations of God, through their virtuous lives, for which saints had to perform many thousands of years of hard penance. If we entertain evil thoughts, it is difficult to erase them. Evil thoughts, if we entertain in our minds repeatedly, they become strong. Then it is very difficult to eradicate them, even if we try hard. Those thoughts would come to our mind automatically. This happens in the case of good thoughts also. So the best way to be free from bad thoughts is not to entertain, even for the first time, the evil thought, or if it comes, nip them in the butt. If we could not do, remain passive and let the thought pass off, that is, without applying our mind or attending to those thoughts. In other words, ignoring them so that they lose their potency and die away. Positive thoughts should be kept alive by reinforcing them in memory, by recital, remembering and recalling. Techniques of meditation, like taking to technique of Ashtanga Yoga propounded by Patanjali, also helps to expel evil thought from our minds and clean up our mind from its impurities. Taking vratas or austerities like the one taken during pilgrimage to Shabarimala strictly also helps to purify the mind and makes eligible for divine grace. Now, to recapitulate, in this article, attempt has been made to examine some of the cardinal principles or principles governing right way of living and how they work to make our life more wholesome and successful. Taking to those values, our day-to-day life may appear to be a gigantic task, but it is not true. Once we develop the will, understanding, and start practicing, we should find it easy, just like a person who has learned swimming enjoys swimming in deep waters. We scare others who do not know swimming. Thank you.